Hey friends, thank you so much for joining us. I have the one and only Andy Hoffman from Miles Franklin back on the line. And before we get started, again, just my heartfelt thanks to the more than 522 now patrons who have stepped up on Patreon in response to Google's fascist tactics. You really are all friends, and you know, when you're under fire, you really learn pretty quickly who your true friends are, and apparently I'm blessed to have many of them, including Andy Hoffman. Andy, how are you?
I am great, and yes, both myself, Miles Franklin, we appreciate everything you do, and you and I have been doing videos or audios every week now for 5.5 years. That's a lot of videos.
We've been through a lot, haven't we? And I'll tell you what's weird about it, Andy. You and I have been talking about these things, right? The fascist tactics of the global elite that are aligned against us, be that the Federal Reserve or Wall Street, the criminal banks. And now we're seeing more and more evidence of their tactics, right? Their strategies to shut down honest businesses, to not allow us to have a level playing field. And at the end of the day, in the spirit of freedom and liberty, as Americans, that's all we want, Andy, is a level playing field. But I think they're taking a play right out of the Rockefeller playbook. They don't want a level playing field.
Right. It's the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, or the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is all we are asking for. And there seem to be less and less opportunities, and not just from that end. I mean, there's a lot of people in the world right now, and there's a lot less opportunity than there used to be. And sadly, the breakdown of the fiat Ponzi scheme is causing a lot of draconian government efforts, aided by what I call the evil troika of Washington, Wall Street, and the mainstream media. And we're in a very difficult situation, which fortunately for us, the fundamentals are on our side, because more and more people are seeing through what's going on, and also more and more people are suffering from what's going on. So between the elections that we're starting to see, like Trump being elected, and the Brexit, and hopefully Marine Le Pen next month in France, the people are starting to fight back, and there's a lot more of us than there are of them.
Well, that's what I'm finding, too. The people really are outraged, and they're willing to take action now. And I think that that's what's so darn inspiring about, at least for me, what's happened to me recently on YouTube is they've turned off monetization and not really explained or addressed it in any really way, shape, or form. People have stepped up, and it really warms your heart, because you realize that like-minded individuals, like the 2%, I mean, what was it in the Revolutionary War? Wasn't it really, wasn't it less than 5% that actually stood up and took action, right? And people are getting to that point, right? People are tired of being the frog slowly boiling in the pot. And I think it's buoying to know that people are getting so informed about this tyranny and so angry about it, because angry people are willing to take action, politically speaking, if nothing else.
Right. Unfortunately, what I do for a living, my job is aligned with my personal investment strategy and my goal, which of educating people, which I've now been doing for it'll be 15 years next month in this sector. First at the GATA website, and then through when I worked at Torrey Hills Capital, now Miles Franklin, for 5.5 years. I'm able to talk about these things. And again, while I'm not thinking so much about the big picture issues you're talking about, I can do quite a lot of damage educating people of the financial issues, which, as I said, fortunately are on our side, because the debt is exploding, the currencies are serially collapsing, and between the overpopulation, the demographics, the debt, there's just no way out of this other than to hyperinflate, which is going to push people out of fiat currencies and into precious metals to preserve their wealth.
All right, let's talk about gold. Now, as you know, and you wrote an article about, on April 2nd, Zero Hedge reported this: Moscow and Beijing join forces to bypass U.S. dollar in global markets, shift to gold trade. I'll read the first paragraph. The Russian central bank opened its first overseas office in Beijing on March 14th, marking a step forward in forging a Beijing-Moscow alliance to bypass the U.S. dollar in the global monetary system and to phase in a gold-backed standard of trade. Andy, I know you wrote about that. Is gold money? China and Russia think so, you wrote, and the whole world shortly will too. How big of an epic sea change is this, or is it just more of this slippery slope away from the dollar as world's reserve currency that we've been seeing now for several years?
Well, I don't like to overstate certain actions, but this particular one, per that article, I think is a very big deal, because even I was taken a bit surprised back by it, because the name of that article is Gold Money, or the beginning of the name of the article is kind of a sequel to an article I wrote 3 years ago called Is Gold Money? Who Cares? And in that article, the premise was that while many people think that I, am some kind of quote gold bug that religiously believes that gold is the only thing that should ever be used as a means of value, it couldn't be further from the truth. What I said was, first of all, governments have destroyed every gold standard due to the same reasons they've destroyed every fiat currency regime by fraud and abuse, and including here, 1933, 1971, you name it. So it's not like I believe that gold will be, quote, money from a utilitarian fashion. I think it's the best storage of value that the world has ever known and will continue to be, and people will flock into it. And so from an investment perspective, I think it's the best way to protect yourself. That said, of course, gold can be used as money. I mean, it's more of a barter type thing because it's not very useful as far as transacting with it, because it's not really divisible and it's hard to store and to carry around. But if you're talking about what China and Russia are doing, which is to use it as a settlement mechanism for trade, now that's a major usage as money that other countries may wind up starting to do as their currencies fail. Because, I mean, in Russia and China's case, they are the two largest buyers of gold in the world. I'm not sure if they're the two largest. China is definitely the world's largest. And while Russia is near the top, it's possible they have a lot more than they say. So we're talking about two of the world's largest buyers and potentially owners deciding that they may do major, swap agreements or bilateral trade agreements where they settle trade in gold. And I think that's going to definitely be seen by the world as they watch their currencies start to fall apart as a potential means of big picture trade usage for gold as money.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about this level playing field and the lack of it over at the COMEX in Craig Hemke's recent article. But before I do that, let's stay on this track with settlement in gold. Do you think that this news would have people in the New York Fed and the Federal Reserve itself shaking in their boots? Because, as you know, and I know, there hasn't been an audit of Fort Knox gold since, 1954, 1956? So what would the scenario be that would allow the United States to follow suit and settle anything in gold?
Well, that's never going to happen here because we don't have any gold. That's the whole point. That's why it's never been audited, and they know it. Probably most of the people in the government have no idea because they're probably a big "Don't come in" sign at Fort Knox.
Right.
And so I don't think anyone, the Obama administration or the Trump administration, has a clue that all that gold is gone. It's been encumbered or sold. I mean, look at the Germans. It took them all that time to get their gold that they could have gotten in a week if it was there. And then when they finally did obviously demand it because of all that's going on in Europe, they got different gold than they had put there. So it was the Fed scrambled for it, or the Treasury. So no, the U.S. is going to fight for its reserve currency standard to the bitter end. And when it dramatically loses purchasing power and it's no longer the global standard, whether it's gold or something else that replaces it, they will be in the back of the queue, as Obama would say, because there's no way we're going to ever be able to get back the gold that we had.
Let me ask you about gold standards. You wrote in your recent article, "Back to Gold Standards, I'm continually amazed at those who believe they could return, given how, as has been the case with every fiat currency regime ever attempted, every gold standard has been destroyed by government fraud, collusion, and abuse, let alone at a time when government credibility will unquestionably be at all-time lows, when countless global governments themselves face regime change, as is starting to occur already, which is why it's doubly laughable when Jim Rickards suggests fiat currencies will be replaced by SDRs, which in essence are a basket of the same lame fiat currencies that are simultaneously falling, issued by the very same governments that are not only being overthrown, but viciously fighting among themselves." All right, so if we have Russia and China talking about gold settlement, the rest of the West is going to do what? Where does this end? If Russia and China move to gold and gold standards, where does that leave the rest of us? Or do you think that that's not what's going to happen ultimately with Russia and China either? It's not a gold standard. It's just trying to bypass the dollar.
Yeah, I don't think that they're trying to say that. And actually, when I saw the Zero Hedge article, they intimated that, well, if the world's going to change to a gold standard, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's what they're saying. I think they are trying to get around the dollar. That they created their own SWIFT system, their own clearing system to compete. They've created the New Development Bank, formerly known as the BRICS Development Bank, to compete with the World Bank. And these are two countries that hate America, and they don't want to be dependent on America anymore because they just get abused by it in every way, shape, and form. And actually, we'll probably see that when Premier Jinping comes to Florida, and Trump tries to abuse his biggest creditor about, ironically, about the things we do, currency manipulation, all those kind of things. So yes, this is just one means of bypassing the dollar. I think another one is going to be once, OPEC is falling apart. I mean, now we have, this whole OPEC deal, I said, was a sham from the beginning. The compliance is falling apart, that the production is soaring around the world. And once OPEC, truly falls apart, which may happen when they have to renew this deal in June, and it doesn't happen, Saudi Arabia is going to fall apart. They're not going to be able to IPO Saudi Aramco for $100 billion, and they're going to get taken over by the forces in there that the anti-American forces, and kind of end the petrodollar status. So I think there's a lot of forces out there that are trying to get around the dollar and eating away at its reserve status. One of them is going to be the use of gold, which just happens to come out of nowhere as a very strong method of doing so. So it's not just that. I mean, the powers that be are now going to have to fight cryptocurrencies. They're going to have to fight the power of China and the BRICS, which are only going to get stronger. And also they're fighting themselves. I mean, look, Europe is falling apart. The United States is becoming a political basket case. And, that pink elephant in the room of the exploding debts that are destroying the currencies and the economies is only going to get bigger and pinker.
All right. Well, I want to ask you about level playing fields, the COMEX, the LBMA. Craig Hemke wrote a great article called Econ 101, Silver Market Manipulation. And the point of the whole article was that the bankers have kept the playing field unlevel over at the COMEX by not allowing supply to meet demand, because there's endless supply, right? They're not dealing in physical precious metals, which is why the prices of silver continue to be capped in the 18s. The same being true with gold, but certainly it's worse in silver. There's endless supply for finite demand. Even though demand is rising year over year, endless supply to meet that demand over at the COMEX. So does this just go on forever? How outraged do we need to get before this changes? Or will it just finally end under the weight of its own criminality?
Well, we don't have to. It doesn't matter if we're outraged or not. It's going to happen. It's called the forces of economic mother nature. And, I actually wrote an article last week called, with a question mark, the upcoming silver Waterloo, because I see that the tiny bit of supply is starting to be run. I mean, we've seen half of the whole COMEX registered gold inventory be withdrawn since the election, and we just saw 15% of the silver in one day the other day. So we're down to $500 million worth of silver and $1 billion worth of gold. We also saw. And yes, and by the way, that was a great article by Craig. I know exactly what you're talking about. We also have seen, people don't even realize, as of last Tuesday, meaning before the price went up to its high for the year, the all-time highest commercial short position. The only other time we've had a position that short was last July, right after the Brexit. We had a major crisis, and they were trying to cap prices. Here we don't have a crisis, and yet they've had to take out this kind of short position. And keep in mind that last year, Bix put out that nice video a few weeks ago showing how paper trading in the COMEX and the LBMA was up a whopping 50, not 15, 50% last year. And Steve St. Angelo just did a similar report the other day showing that paper gold and silver trading last year was also up 50% worldwide last year. And this was in a year where gold and silver actually rose. So it just shows you how much effort is being put in right now to hold the prices down, which are only making the supply demand tighter, because unequivocally demand was at an all-time high last year. And also supply is now verified to have peaked in both gold and silver, not in 16, in 15. And even Standard & Poor's put out a study last week. I've been saying this forever, that you're going to see plunging supply, but even S&P, this mainstream thing, put out a report in December saying that gold production would fall 25% over the next decade. So we're talking about the demand is at a record high. Supply is now falling, which is the complete opposite of what you're seeing in pretty much every commodity. And there's no hope that the supply is going to change anytime soon. So with all that's going on in the world, I don't think that the supply is going to hold out much longer. I mean, let's see. Maybe Andrew McGuire is right. He thinks sometime in the first half of this year something's going to break based on what he sees. I don't know if he's what he sees, but with all of the events that are coming up, black, gray, swans, you name it, at some point we have to have, as what I deemed it a few weeks ago, the most long-awaited or most overdue crisis in history. I mean, just look at the French election. That alone will end everything. If Marine Le Pen wins, which I believe she will. So there's, it's going to be something or many things, but it's the supply that's holding the price down is less than it's ever been, and it's only going to get tighter.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I have a way to round out this conversation.
Oh, and I want to add one thing.
Sure.
We're talking about, what's going on at the COMEX now, like today. It's ridiculous. These PMI data is horrible. And look at the price of gold and silver right now as we write. 18.15 for silver and 12.46 for gold. Do you know what the 200-week moving averages for gold and silver are? 18.13 and 12.46. And I've been writing for the past, 3-4 weeks about the 200-week moving average war. And this is not 200-day. This is 200-week moving average war. Basically, the price of gold and silver traded above their 200-week moving averages from 2003 all the way to 2013 during this huge rally. And the only reason they went below that level was literally on April 11, 2013, Obama had his closed-door meeting with the top two big-to-fail bank CEOs, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all of them. And that was the same day that Goldman Sachs put out the aggressive shorts recommendation on gold. And sure enough, the next day, the 12th and the 15th, it was a Friday and a Monday, gold and silver was smashed by like 10%, pushed them below their 200-week moving averages. And then we had to suffer through prices being down for years. Less so in other currencies, but definitely in the dollar. And prices didn't bottom until the end of 2015, which happened to be the day that the Fed raised interest rates. And so we've been fighting to get above this key technical resistance level ever since. Twice last year, it got up there briefly, right after the Brexit and on election night eve, or election night right after Trump. And in both cases, the cartel came in to push prices down. Well, sure enough, we've broken above that level now. Actually, as I speak, we're sitting right at that level. So there is a war going on because, believe me, there are tons and tons of traders and institutions around the world that are looking for a breach on the upside of this to commit more funds. So that's what you're seeing right now. If they fail with their record short positions and, to hold prices down, you're going to see a huge rally. And I'm just hoping that this is what ends their reign of terror, because this year there's more opportunity for that to happen than ever before.
All right, well said. And again, I thought of a way to bring this conversation full circle, coming back to the fake news meme. As you know, Google is circling the wagons, and so are the corporate oligarchs in general. All of these major corporations are threatening Google to withhold advertising, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all because of this fake news meme. And this fake news meme arose out of the election, and of course, the corporate mockingbird media pointing the finger at Putin and Russia as playing a role in the election and manipulating the election somehow magically to get Donald Trump elected, when all of us paying attention know that there were 20 and 30,000 people going to Trump rallies and nobody showing up at Hillary Clinton rallies. But the mainstream media ignores that. I just want to share this. If everybody understands that Putin is now the boogeyman of the West and they need to point all guns blazing at Putin to try to have another Cold War, I want to just remind everybody, as we hear the news of this recent terror attack in St. Petersburg in the subway that killed, I think, at least 11 people, that subway terror attack is being blamed on Chechen rebels or Chechen separatists. All right. You're not going to hear this from CNN and Mockingbird Media. Let's go back in time and let's deal with facts. On December 31st, 2013, you might recall the Russian-Saudi showdown at Sochi right before the Olympics, when Saudi intelligence chief Prince Bandar reportedly offered Russian President Putin a deal. If Russia abandons Syria, Saudi Arabia would protect the Sochi Olympics from Islamic terrorists. Stand by, here's more. According to the leaked diplomatic account of that meeting, Bandar sought Russia's cooperation on several Mideast concerns, including Syria, and told Putin, quote, "I can give you a guarantee to protect the Winter Olympics in the city of Sochi on the Black Sea next year. The Chechen groups that threaten the security of the games are controlled by us," end quote. This is why, this sort of detailed historical recount of facts is why Google and the mainstream Mockingbird press does not want you listeners coming to SGT Report or going to Zero Hedge or visiting Miles Franklin or going anywhere thinking outside the box. They don't want you informed. They don't want you using critical thinking. But fortunately, that's exactly what you're going to get when you come and visit us at sgtreport.com. You know, Andy, I know you don't get into that type of geopolitical subterfuge, but it needs to be mentioned because we can see what they're doing. They continue to make Putin the bad guy. The deep state is now in the wide open for everyone to see, and I think the deep state is also playing a role in manipulating these metals. They have been all along.
Well, I'm not sure about the deep state per se, but obviously, as I call them, the powers that be, meaning the people that run the governments and the markets, certainly have an interest in holding together this house of cards. And I will add one thing to your commentary. You mentioned about how Trump had so much support at all his rallies. Well, everyone should take a look at the 60 Minutes interview that Anderson Cooper did with Marine Le Pen a few weeks ago. And well, one, to see how despicable a person he is, but two, to look at the rallies that she had. Take a look at how many people are at those rallies, because they make Trump's rallies look small. So if anyone tells you that she's not popular and that she's not going to win, take a look at how many people come to see her, because she represents the people. And I think it's going to be, as I say, a Brexit times 100 when she wins.
Yeah, amen. Well, and all she wants to do is implement some common sense, right? Just bring
Absolutely.
Common sense back to government. We got to cap our immigration. Look what they've done to the streets of Paris through this unregulated, unmitigated immigration. That's what Trump was proposing too. They demonize him all day for it. Andy, thanks for being a truth teller. Can you tell people how they can get a hold of you to buy precious metals?
Of course, Miles Franklin's now been in business for 28 years without a single registered complaint, and I write every day for free and do podcasts like this for free at milesfranklin.com. You can call us at 800-822-8080 or email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
Very good. And guys, I really do want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. The outpouring of support I've seen in the past several days has absolutely floored me. It's humbled me, and I really, truly want you to know how grateful I am for all of you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your support at sgtreport.com, and my special thanks to my more than 500 patrons over at Patreon. Really, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend ahead. God bless.
If we go to silver, what you see now is it dropped and they increased their short position yet again, and now they're back to even with the greatest short position in history.